All right, hello, my name is Aakansha Kanyal, and today I'll be presenting on active versus passive lower limb prosthetics and their implication for the future of parasport. So a little bit of background on my topic. So prosthetics have been around for thousands of years and have been made from a variety of different materials and in a variety of different shapes and sizes. But currently, there are now three different types of prosthetics: passive, semi-active, and active. So passive, these are the ones that you are most probably aware of. They look most similar to the natural limb, and they offer the most basic functionality. Semi-active, these ones use microprocessor technology. So basically, they use technology that helps detect signals such as electromyography in the muscle cells, and this is then decoded by a separate technology, and then the function is performed, or the movement. This basically just aids in added control of the prosthetic. And then lastly, active prosthetics. These are prosthetics that are powered by an external power source, and they also add positive work. And of these three types of technology, only one is allowed in competitive sports, as according to the Olympic guidelines, equipment that results in athletic performance being generated by machines, engines, electronics, motors, robotic mechanisms, or the like, or osseointegrated prosthetics are strictly prohibited. But passive prosthetics have some shortcomings when it comes to athletic performance, as it's found that passive prosthetics show more asymmetrical gait, which basically means that both legs have different levels of functionality in terms of step frequency and such, which means that there's higher oxygen consumption. In fact, it's found that most amputees are only at 60% of their maximum aerobic speed, or VO2. VO2 is really important in sport as it's an indicator of oxygen efficiency and thus an indicator for athletic performance. So the lower your oxygen consumption level is, the more likely you're not able to perform to the max of your abilities. Thus, it means that current para-athletes are not able to compete at a level that's perhaps closer to able-bodied athletes because they're just not able to consume their oxygen more efficiently because of the technology that they use. Thus, with this paper, I was hoping to compare active versus passive prosthetics that are out there and their advancements, and then what these advancements mean for the future of parasport. All right, so for the methodology, I used 3 online databases: Google Scholar, PubMed, and Wiley Online Library. I searched these databases with a variety of different keywords, such as prosthetics, sport, prosthetics in sport, Paralympics, prosthetics versus able-bodied, energy expenditure, bionics in sport, EMG, and advancements in EMG. And then I included all studies that were written in English and over the past 40 years. I also used some additional sources like New York Times articles and such that were just to provide more background for my paper. So the result, in total, I used and found a total of 20 articles. 2 of those 20 articles focused on the comparison between the biomechanics of movements between able-bodied and amputees. 3 of the 20 focused on oxygen consumption of prosthetics, and then 1 of those 3 focused specifically on para-athletes. 6 out of the 20 focused on advancements in prosthetics in general, and then 3 of those 6 focused on EMG-specific advancements. So in terms of passive advancements, there are 2 main articles that I used for this. One studied the effects of prosthetic stiffness and prosthetic height on sport, and the other studied prosthetic weight. So with prosthetic stiffness, it was found that with every 1 kilonewton meter increase in prosthetic stiffness, there was overall increased leg stiffness. And then with prosthetic height, it was shown that there is no significant increase in leg stiffness, but it was found that with increased height, there was increased step length and decrease in step frequency. And then with prosthetic weight, overall, there wasn't much of a change, because although there was initially more mechanical energy transfer, it was balanced out by the additional energy that was used during the terminal swing of the leg movement. So in terms of EMG advancements, there was one novel technology that I really liked, which was the regenerative peripheral nerve interface. Basically, with this technique, scientists implant nerve fascicles into the muscle gland of the residual limb. And basically, this functions as an amplifier and produces high amplitude EMG signals. This study was done with 4 people, and 4 out of the 4 people were able to contract when instructed to using the RPNI technology. Additionally, 2 out of those 4 were elected to do elected to have additional electrodes implanted, and this or allowed them to intrinsically control the thumb movement. There are also some additional effects of using this type of technology is that it also reduces phantom pain and prevents neuroma formations. So what does this actually mean in terms of sport? So out of the 3 advancements or things that can be changed with passive prosthetics, only one is most likely to be changed, as it's the one that provides the most improvement in terms of oxygen consumption, as it was found that with increased stiffness, prosthetic stiffness, there's lower leg stiffness, which means that there's lower metabolic cost. Although prosthetic height and prosthetic weight didn't really change anything in terms of oxygen consumption, it was found that with increased height that there was lower running speeds. So currently, prosthetics are based and made based off of athlete proportion, but there aren't too many strict guidelines in terms of what can be changed. So with the chance of improved athleticism, para-athletes can incorporate some of these changes, such as prosthetic stiffness, as these modifications would obviously have to be within reason with the Olympic guidelines, but those guidelines do have vague terminology, which means that, again, there could be changes, and that could help that we could see increased athleticism in para-athletes. With active prosthetics, so overall, active prosthetics aren't really used in sport or in general, really, because of a couple shortcomings of the technology. First, there's a lack of user acceptance, which basically means people don't really want to use these type of technology because it's noisier, they weighs a lot more, and it's also not as smooth in terms of movement. There's also a lack of direct control, which means that the user isn't actually able to control the movement to be exactly what they want, and they have to kind of function based off already the embedded data that's out there with active prosthetics. And then lastly, it does not offer a full range of motion, so most active prosthetics can only be used for walking on a more level terrain, not even the rough terrain. And so with the new findings with the RPNI technology, it shows that there is room for improvement as it provides more stable EMG signals, there's smoother movement, and it also has more real-time user control, as we saw with those 2 participants who elected to have the additional electrodes implanted, which meant that they could intrinsically control the thumb muscle movement. So what does this all really mean in terms of sport? So like I said before, active prosthetics are not allowed in sport because of the Olympic guidelines. But with more advancements, people with active prosthetics could have a range of motion that could be used in sport as what we think of, such as running, playing basketball, and all those different types of sport. But it's most likely that the Paralympics will not change its guidelines to include active prosthetics, as not everyone is able to purchase active prosthetics because of the cost that it has. But there is a chance of other competitions to be used, such as Paralympics, or as it's called, Cyber Olympics or Cyberathlon. Cyberathlon is a competition that has already been started in 2019. It allows participants that use active prosthetics to compete against each other. But these athletes compete against each other in more day-to-day movements. So like making bread or moving with obstacles that are more like day-to-day. So like going up a flight of stairs or with more like toys or such or laid around. But again, like I said, as advancements in active prosthetics continue to happen, they could function with a range of movement that we see in regular sports. And such, it's most likely that the Cyber Olympics would modify their rules to include competitions that we see for normal sports, such as like a 50-meter race. Lastly, there's also been talk of competitions that allow for able-bodied and para-athletes to compete against each other. These sort of competitions would include something like a brain sled. So a brain sled is a sled that's being operated by only the brain impulses of the athletes. So this would allow the para-athletes and able-bodied athletes to compete against each other in a more level playing field. When I was conducting my research, there were a few limitations that hindered my research. One of them was limited research literature that's out there. Prosthetics overall are not very studied out there, especially in terms of sport and especially with EMG, as EMG technology is mostly used for upper body, and like I said, this is mostly due to the shortcomings that it has. So because of the limited literature that was out there, the studies that I did use have a varying, like a wide variation of demographics. So they would have athletes or amputees that were amputated in different areas or different types of amputees. So like there were bilateral amputees, ankle amputees, and such. They also had for para athletes specifically, they used different types of companies for the prosthetics, which could affect how much oxygen consumption or how much improvement it really has when you change prosthetic stiffness and such. Also, in terms of metabolic cost, again, because of the limited literature out there, it only compared the metabolic cost of para athletes and able-bodied athletes when the para athletes were wheelchair athletes. So there wasn't people who use prosthetics that were really being studied out there. And so it's not completely clear how much the oxygen consumption is based off of those two types of people, but based off of what was there with the wheelchair athletes and the able-bodied athletes, I made some assumptions of how much could be improved upon with the advances that I've talked about before. Lastly, I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my mentor. Without her, I would not have been able to complete this paper by my own. She helped narrow down all the different ideas that I had. She helped me find a software that was able to organize and annotate all the different research that I was looking at. And then lastly, she reviewed my paper multiple times after I made numerous edits.